Welcome the 12th step. I'll hand over to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And Julie, it's an honor to be with you guys today, to be able to be with other people who are on the same mission that I am, from all over the place. This is awesome. It's just a real thrill. And I have to tell you, I live in Dallas, Texas. The Cowboys are playing right now. I don't know if you're familiar with our teams over here. I'm a huge Cowboy fan, but I wouldn't miss doing this for the world. So they're going to have to play without me. When Sharon asked me to do this, I was sort of in a tizzy about what I should speak about. I know that you have excellent speakers all the time, and you do deep dives into the steps. And next week, I'm going to be really doing a deep dive into step 12, particularly not just in carrying the message, but practicing these principles in all our affairs. This week, I want to talk about the Big Book in general. I know I'm preaching to the choir for many of you, but whether you're brand new or you've been sober for 1,000 years, or you've been working the steps and are just expert students on the Big Book, I hope that I can bring something to this occasion that will give you some new things to think about. I wanted to talk about the importance of the Big Book because when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was in 1982. And I finally got a sobriety date in 1984, and I stayed sober for about 7 years. And then I began a series of relapses that went on for a really long time. My sobriety date is January the 18th of 2003. Prior to January the 18th of 2003, I had no idea what AA was. I went to meetings, and I know that probably many of you have done this too. I went to meetings and I really thought that the solution to alcoholism was to just simply not drink one day at a time and go to a meeting every day. And that worked for me to some extent for about 7 years. I was young then, and I enjoyed the meetings and I enjoyed the fellowship. And most of the meetings I attended were not Big Book. They were just open discussion meetings. And I kind of got the sense that that was how you stayed sober, is that you just came in and dumped everything on the table and talked about it. And then you went on your merry way. And then you came back the next day and did the same thing. I was fortunate enough to be able to get hooked up to a group called the Primary Purpose Group in Dallas. And I had excellent sponsorship. And then my sponsor left AA. And then I was able to have Cliff Bishop, who has passed away, which is why I'm using his last name, who founded the Primary Purpose Group to be my sponsor. So if any of you know about any of that stuff, you know I was absolutely put in the Big Book, and that was what we did, and that's exactly how we did it. I don't think anybody is particularly interested in reading the Big Book until they're convinced of their step one. And I never knew what step one meant. I thought step one was simply, I admit I'm an alcoholic to you, my brothers and sisters, and I'm a real loser, so help me. I didn't know what the disease of alcoholism was. I didn't realize that what step one says is that I am powerless over alcohol. And the powerlessness over alcohol is two parts. The first part is that I have a body that cannot metabolize alcohol efficiently, which produces an allergy. Because of that, when I drink, I don't ever get enough. I just keep drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. Was that always true for me? No, I can probably list some times when I didn't overdrink, but they would be very few and far between. but particularly in the last years of my drinking, I I could drink a fifth in 5 minutes, well, 20 minutes. Um, and I didn't know why I was doing it. I had no idea why I was doing it. So I had to make up a lot of things in my mind about, why am I doing this? It must be because I had a controlling mother. I mean, I was trying to therapy my way through this thing, that that circumstances has driven me to drink. If you had had my life, you'd be a drunk too. And my life was pretty good, to tell you the truth. But I invented reasons for why I was drinking so much. I didn't realize that I really had an allergy to alcohol. And finally, I got that. And then I got the worst part about this disease, and that's the mental obsession. The second thing I'm powerless over is my mind. I have an obsession that tells me I can drink, eat, regardless of what past circumstances have been. And people would say to me, well, if you don't remember your last drunk, you're going to drink again. Well, I remembered my last drunk, but that didn't keep me from drinking again. I was not receiving the depth and weight that the big book provides. And I'm not blaming any of those people. They were loving, well-meaning people. They didn't know. They did not know. The big book was written in 1939. It was published in 1939. Bill Wilson wrote it. And since that time, it had gradually become kind of diluted with the egos of alcoholics who want to sort of make our own edits and changes and not follow the precise directions that are given to us. But when I took my step one, when I really knew that I was powerless over alcohol, and I had tried everything I knew to try. I had read every book except the big book. I had been to therapy. I had been to psychics. I had done everything I knew to do. I mean, everything I could come up with, medications, whatever, and nothing worked. And I was convinced of step one to the very tips of my toes, that I knew that I would drink again. Always before, when I quit drinking, I would swear it off and say, I'm never going to drink again. And I would drink again. This time I didn't swear it off. This time I was willing to pick up the book and follow the directions with the guidance of an excellent sponsor. And then I was able to achieve sobriety. I don't know of any other way to do it. There may be other ways to do it, but nothing I had ever tried was possible for me. So if you have taken step one, you might be curious to know how this works. And in the title page of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says it's the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. I had never seen that. I really was of the school that I would always be recovering one day at a time. One day at a time. Just don't drink one day at a time. I have a dear person in my life right now who was arrested for drunk driving, and she's having to go to classes where they talk about how you have a choice. Just choose not to drink. How dangerous that is. I mean, I have no choice. I learned that in step one. But I do have the choice. What I do have the choice of doing is seeking the solution in the book. This book is an agent of change. A lot of us, when we first get here, all we really want to have happen is to quit drinking and then stay the same. But this book is an agent of change because everything has to change. That doesn't mean you have to move out of your house. That doesn't mean you have to get a divorce. I'm not talking about that kind of change. I'm talking about an internal change. Everything is going to have to change. All of my old ideas are going to have to be set aside so that new things can come into my life. And when we first get here, we're not sure we want it like that, because that sounds like I'm going to have to go be a missionary in some foreign country or something. I mean, I'm terrified. I don't want to change everything. Oh, but God, I'm so glad that I was willing. I'm so glad that I finally got to the point where whatever. And if you're at that point, you're ready for this book. And that very first title page is a promise that we can recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body that have to be convinced of in step one. Before this book is going to have any meaning, before I'm going to pick it up and study it, I have to be convinced of step one. I have to know that I am absolutely screwed, that there's no hope, that there's nothing that's within my power that's going to get me sober. And then in the preface, it says in the second paragraph, because this book has become the basic text for our society. This book is our basic textbook. There are a lot of other books that are available, but there are no other books besides this book that's going to be your textbook. So that's why this book is so important. It's going to give me precise directions on what to do to recover from alcoholism. And I just can't stress enough the importance of being willing to change. I have the privilege of sponsoring a lot of women. And when they first come in, I mean, they aren't that willing to change. They just want to stop drinking. We have to be willing to be changed. And this book is going to show us how to do it, because I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to change me. It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous in the foreword to the first edition are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So this is our basic textbook. It's going to tell us how to do it. Ego doesn't want to change. My sponsor from the very beginning talked to me about how I'm not going to ever get rid of my ego, but we want to rock our egos to sleep. We want to put them kind of, on the back burner so that we can become teachable. And we are the least teachable people. We can just be like snakes crawling on the ground when we first get here, just so desperate. But pretty soon we start thinking for ourselves again. And this book is saying, I've got to throw all that out. I got to throw all that out and become willing to allow a power greater than myself to change me. Let's see. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I am going to have to do some work. I'm going to have to take some action. And this book is going to tell me exactly how to take that action. Up until this point in my life, we have been learning by just simply reading and studying and memorizing, right? All through school. That's how we think we're to do this. And we're taught to use our brains, to think things out. To think, right? This is not a book about thinking. This is a book about action. This is a book that has a chapter called Into Action. It doesn't have a chapter called Into Thinking anywhere in this book. So this is a revolutionary change in how we're going to go about to get sober. We're going to go about to get sober by taking actions. And by taking those actions, we will be changed. Up until this point, all my life, I thought about things before I took an action. Now we're going to take an action, and then the right thoughts will follow. We have to have a spiritual awakening, a psychic change. A lot of us come in here without the desire to have a spiritual connection, without the desire to seek a power greater than ourselves. But if you've tried everything you know to do and it's all failed, maybe, just maybe, there is a power that can get me sober. I believed that there was a power greater than myself when I got to AA. I believed that that was true, mostly because I was afraid not to believe it. But I was mad at that power because I had been praying and going to church and doing all the things that this church told me to do, and I was still getting drunk. I was getting drunk before I went to church. And I thought, well, God just doesn't want to have anything to do with me. But this book, the beauty of it is that we get to find a God of our own understanding. It doesn't have to be like anybody else's God or anybody else's concept of God. And we're going to do that by taking these steps. And it's going to be revealed to us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it will be revealed to us. In Bill's story, he gives us a piece of hope that I think is really awesome. See, it's on page 8. On page 8, it says, trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. The mental obsession kicked in. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone had resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. You see, up to this point, there was no hope for an alcoholic. They didn't have a way out. And then he says how dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted in what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. That sounds so poetic, doesn't it? But it is literally true. The hope for anyone who comes into Alcoholics Anonymous is that we will be catapulted into the fourth dimension of existence. That I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So that gave me huge hope. This is literal. It's not just poetic. We really do get catapulted into this. So when I first got here, I didn't really understand how that was going to happen. I just wanted to quit drinking. And I didn't know how to make this happen. I have a daughter, Caroline, whom some of you may have heard speak before. And she does this really cute kind of metaphorical thing where she says, it's like telling a person, you need to fly. You need to fly into this fourth dimension of existence. You're going to have to fly. And so we start batting our arms and we can't fly. We don't know how to fly. But just over there is a jet that's going to catapult me into the fourth dimension of existence without any effort on my part. That's a promise in the 10th step. All I have to do is work these 12 steps, and then I will be sent to this fourth dimension of existence. It's not just about not drinking. It's about learning how to live a life that's fulfilling and peaceful. And by following the direction in this book, I can do that. We want to get a sponsor to take us through this work because we can't read our way through it. I don't know about you guys, but to me, when I was reading the book on my own, it sounded sort of archaic, and it was an awkward kind of language, and I needed somebody to read it with me. Now, by profession, I am a reading teacher. So I know how to read, but I needed help with it. I needed help with it. And I needed someone who is described on page 18, but the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So that's what a sponsor's job is to do. So I need a sponsor to take me through this book, a sponsor who fulfills these requirements to take me through. Now, I did have a sponsor who lectured me, but I needed it. I needed some tough love because I had been that person as described in We Agnostics. And I know this is true of each and every one of you, that what we had really been worshiping on all our lives was our own ability to reason. Reason is a good thing. It will take us so far, but it will not take us far enough. And so I don't need to, and remember, my ability to reason was telling me that it was okay to drink again. So I have to set that aside and be willing to submit to this process that the book is going to offer me. Okay. By working these steps, I'm promised that I will have a spiritual awakening that will remove my obsession with alcohol. It will not remove the allergy I have to alcohol, but as long as I don't pick up a drink, I'm okay. But this spiritual awakening will remove my obsession with alcohol. And that's what I want. And not only that, they call alcohol spirits. I think they do over where you live too. But in the United States, it's quite often referred to as spirits. I've been looking for a spiritual awakening my whole life. I wanted to be in the world of the spirit. And by the time we get to step 10, it's promised to us. It says that we have entered the world of the spirit. And that's where I wanted to be when I was drinking. I didn't want to be here. Because here, I couldn't control things. And I have to give up control. I have to let go of old ideas and become willing to embrace new ideas, to be willing to listen with an open heart and an open mind. In the chapter to the employers, it talks about how, we can send you to treatment, we can do all kinds of things for you, but unless you undergo a change of heart, nothing is going to happen. Unless we undergo this entire change of heart. So this isn't just about not drinking. This book is teaching me how to change everything about me. Not by telling me stop being selfish. It's going to show me that only God can do that for me. All the things that are necessary for me to have this psychic change are going to be given to me by working the steps. It tells us on page 88, we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the way we have just outlined. So this is a program of discipline, which is not a word that alcoholics usually like to hear, but it's a program that's going to teach us how to live life. setting the drink problem aside, the book tells us we have to be convinced that we've made a complete mess of our lives. A lot of us come here and we know we've made a mess of our lives. I mean, we've got court dates and all kind of stuff hanging over our heads. Some of us come in just we're just screwed by alcohol, and we don't really realize what a tornado we've been in, what a mess we've made of our lives. But by working these steps and going through this process, we begin to learn it. So first we have to realize we're powerless over alcohol, that nothing within my power is going to change that. And then when I get to step 2, I'm learning that I get to have my own concept of God, and that my ability to reason has been my God up until this point. And when we get to step 3, it's so interesting. It says the first requirement is that we have to be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I wasn't convinced of that at step 3, but as I moved through the book, I became more and more convinced that I'd been running my life on self-will. This is kind of an overview of all of the things that we're doing. And I'm telling you, even today, with over 18 years of sobriety, when self-will comes into play, and it does, it continues to, I get myself in a mess. I don't even realize I'm doing it. You know, those of us who are parents or have jobs or whatever it is that we're responsible for, still think that we know better, that we have a better idea on how to do things. We don't. I need this power greater than myself to guide me through each and everything that I'm doing. When we get to how we know we've taken step 3 is when we're really willing to take a fact-finding and fact-facing inventory of ourselves. It's not meant to shame me. It's meant to show me what's not working in my life. And then I share it with another person. And I start by sharing it with another person. I'm no longer looking down all the time. I'm starting to look the world in the eye and realize that I'm just another person on this planet. I'm just a grain of sand in the grand scheme of things. And so I have nothing to be ashamed about. And I can go and face people in steps 8 and 9, and I can go and face people, and I can look them in the eye and say, I did this and this was wrong. I was selfish. I was dishonest. And I can look the world in the eye. And I begin to realize shame is not required anymore. Truth is required, and the truth is going to set me free. It no longer is going to matter to me how much you like me or respect me. What matters to me is that I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what spiritual maturity is all about. And that's what this book is going to give us. This kind of maturity where I can go out and be a person in the world. And I don't have to be special. I am special. We all are special, but I don't have to get credit for it. I can just move throughout the day. And then we get to step 10, where we continue to take personal inventory. And we're doing that as we move through the book. We're doing that as we are doing our 9th step amends. Step 10 during coronavirus, I have to confess to you, has been my weakest link. Because during all this isolation, I was just sort of sitting there wondering what to do next. And I would go on meetings and I would do those things. But I wasn't out in the world bumping heads, and so step 10 started losing its importance in my life. And that was a huge mistake for me. I have to do step 10. I have to talk to other alcoholics. I have to be honest about what's going on with myself. I don't know about what was going on with you guys during isolation. I don't know how isolated you are now, but it was pretty grim for me, because it almost felt like being drunk, because every day was the same day. And so I had to get back into the rhythm, back into the practice, because half measures are going to avail me nothing, of doing thorough 10th steps constantly. And what a relief. I didn't realize how jammed up I'd gotten. And I'm sharing that with you because I know that happens to everybody. I know that we sort of rest on our laurels sometimes, but I'm just telling you, my brothers and sisters, I'm as guilty of that as anyone. And I have to pick myself back up and get back into the groove of what I'm supposed to be doing. And this book tells me that. And that's why this book is so important. It's as important to me today as it was when I first started working the steps. My 11th step has to be every morning and every night. And that is something I haven't let go of ever. Spending that time in the morning with God, spending that time asking him to divorce my thinking from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives, so that now I get my brains back and I can use my thinking with assurance when I'm divorced of these things and I'm growing closer and closer to God. The longer I stay sober and the older I get, the more powerless I realize I am on my own. It's just an amazing thing. And I have to put my reliance upon God. There's so many, I had this vision that when I retired, life would be like I could go rest on a beach somewhere. No, no. And that's dangerous for those of us who've been sober for a while. And as we get older, this program has to be as meaningful today as it ever was. And it is. It is a way of life that works. And then I move into step 12, where I'm carrying this message to other alcoholics and practicing these principles in all my affairs. These are the things, if you're new, it sounds overwhelming, but we do it one step at a time. As Joe and Charlie describe it, as a domino effect. And we do it quickly. You know, we start with step 1 and move quickly through it. If you want a spiritual awakening, if you are convinced that that is the only thing that's going to save you from this disease, the only thing that's going to save me from drinking myself to death, I don't need to wait around. I love the example they give, that Joe and Charlie give, about if you're going to bake a cake, you don't put the flour in the bowl and then next week add the eggs. I mean, you're moving through it quickly. In the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, Dr. Bob would take people through steps 1, 2, and 3, like in a matter of minutes. You know, are you convinced of your truth in step 1? Are you willing to believe that there's a power greater than yourself? You don't even have to believe it, just be willing to believe. Are you ready to find out how to turn your will and life over to the care of God? Then you can go to meetings, you know. But we have to move through this quickly. We don't rest on our laurels. We don't take a pause. And this book emphasizes action and immediacy all throughout. So that's the importance of the big book. The main point of this book is to show us how to get sober. And it also says, let's see, I'm not as sharp today as I would like to be, because I'm taking on too much at one time. But in We Agnostics, on page 40, on page 45, it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how will we define this power? The next sentence is what this book, it says, well, that's exactly what this book is about. If my only solution to getting sober and staying sober and living happily and usefully in this world is to get connected to a power greater than myself, this book is going to show me exactly how to do it. And that's the criticality of this book. Anyway, I'm going to open it up for anybody who has questions or comments, and then I will find it in the book for you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.